presented by GhostBed.com.
Yeah, welcome to Drinkin, bros, kids.
We're going to be talking all things kimchi today.
Yeah, we are.
Mostly about Asian pastas.
Yeah,
I guess.
Yeah.
That's what I prepared for.
We've got Julia Galef on the show today.
Yeah.
And we're talking about her new book. But the weird thing is, when we pulled up her name, it's a bunch of weird.
I looked for your name on Instagram. I don't think. Do you even have an Instagram account?
I don't.
Okay.
Instagram came after I decided to stop learning about new internet platforms.
Word. Yeah, good. And then I looked up the name of your book, which is the name of this show, The Scout Mindset. And the Instagram account for The Scout Mindset is a bunch of pictures of like Asian pasta with fucking sesame seeds on it.
Great.
So I don't know what to tell you about that.
So your book isn't about Asian cuisine, is what you're saying?
I mean, not directly, but maybe metaphorically if you really squint.
Oh,
okay. There it is. There it is.
Easy.
I mean, look, I'm not going to ding you for the squint line, but you said it, not I did. Nailed it. Boom. We're live on air, so you can't take that back, and I love it. No, nothing we can do on the old YouTubes. But
I don't know what's up with that Instagram account. I know as much as you do.
Yeah,
I have no
really
idea
funny.
who made it or what they think the connection is between Asian pasta and the book The Scout Mindset.
I hope there's a Dan Hollaway Instagram out there somewhere. And it's just pictures of like dirt.
Yeah.
It's just piles of dirt around the world. Like, what is that?
yeah, what is that? Oh, that's beautiful dirt from the Saharan desert.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, okay, great.
People forget that dude that plays the shitty brother on Yellowstone was that turd from American Beauty that liked to watch fucking grocery bags float around in the air.
Yeah.
Jackass.
Yeah.
He's been a jackass his whole fucking career, but I guess that's what happens when you got a rat face. You get typecast as a piece of shit, right?
Yeah, it's like Pesci, dude. That's what you do.
Yeah, but Pesci is a 4'9" guy that got typecast as an Italian tough guy.
Right.
That's not a real thing.
No, it's not at all. Julia, what do you typecast as? What do people think about you?
I've gotten compared to Anne Hathaway before, which I think people are coming around on her now, but for a long time, I'm pretty sure that was an insult.
Man, she's got a weird story, Hathaway. Do you know it? Do you know her background at all?
No.
Super bizarre. So started off in the Princess Diaries, right? Cute, kind of, young, and you were like, all right, I don't know who she's going to turn out to be. Gets older, gets a little hotter, and starts dating this older dude who's like this Italian kind of jet setter.
Like
right?
how much older? Like Celine Dion, she's 13,
No.
he's 50. Or
Oh,
like,
I vaguely remember this.
Yes.
Yeah, she
so the
talked about
guy
it on SNL.
got brought down. He was bilking money from all these people. Huge Ponzi
Right.
scheme. And he was taking millions and millions of dollars from people. And this was Anne Hathaway's fiance for years. And that just kind of got glossed over. So if that's what you're saying, that you're dating somebody with a Ponzi scheme, like that's fine, I guess. But
I think the implication was like uptight, and I don't know what her, negative reputation was exactly, but I always sensed it was something like, uptight, stick in the mud or something. I didn't remember it was also like extremely gullible.
Yeah,
so you can add that to the list.
Is she sex
too
positive
bad.
now? Because that's what all the girls are saying is I'm sex positive now.
I don't know. I'll ask her next time.
I
hang
heard-
out.
I heard a new one that I've never heard before the other day, demisexual, which means you're only sexually attracted to people that you have emotional feelings for.
Ah, you don't say.
I didn't know that was a different thing.
Yeah, I didn't either. You're married. You look like you're married in a traditional marriage, right? It's not
What do
like
you mean a traditional marriage?
not like you're not a Mormon or anything, right? You're not a Mormon?
No, not
Okay.
a Mormon.
No,
Nope.
that's clearly.
I'm engaged, but not married.
Okay. So we didn't know if you were sharing or what was going on. So it's just one dude, right? Or a
Just
lady.
one dude.
Okay. And what does that special fella do?
He is a research, actually he's a program officer now at Open Philanthropy, which is a foundation that was essentially set up to help one of the founders of Facebook figure out where to give away his billions of dollars from Facebook.
And that
So
is tough.
essentially they do research on like, where can dollars do the most good possible?
Right.
And sort of have the highest impact for the most people or animals or whatever.
We're the opposite. If you want to have him give us money for doing the worst shit on the planet, that would be great. Like we're really good at that.
maybe Open Philanthropy will have an opposite day every year where they plug the worst causes possible, and I'll tell them about you guys.
I'm going to a thesaurus to find out what the opposite of philanthropy would be called.
Yeah, let's find out what that word is, and then we'll start making shirts of that ASAP. Tell us about your book and why you decided to write it. We've had some of the most interesting and eclectic guests on over the last few weeks. You are one of them, and I'm curious what made you want to write this.
Sure, yeah. So it's called The Scout Mindset, and it's about, so the framing metaphor of the book is this contrast between two different mindsets, scout mindset and soldier mindset. Soldier mindset's basically my term for this mode that people are very often in, where when they're thinking about evidence, thinking about what's true and what they believe, they're actually just trying to defend some pre-existing belief, or to defend some belief that they want to be true. And so it's called soldier mindset because what you're doing, often just unconsciously without even realizing it, is trying to defend your beliefs as if a fortress against attack. So you're trying to like shoot down opposing argument, or like poke holes in your opponent's logic, and you're trying to like reach for evidence to buttress or support your own position instead of actually thinking about what's true. And so scout mindset is an alternative way of thinking in which, a scout, unlike a soldier, his role is not to attack or defend, it's to go out and see what's actually there to the best of your abilities, and form as accurate a map of the situation or an issue as possible. And so in scout mindset, you're actually trying to figure out what is really true here. What is my honest best guess about the truth? That could be about your life, or a career choice, or about some political issue. And so the book is about how and why to be more of a scout and less of a soldier. And I basically wrote it because I felt like in all of the conversations people were having about, how to reason better or how to make better decisions, there was a lot of emphasis on giving people cognitive skills. Like, here's some knowledge about 101 cognitive biases and logical fallacies. And it's not that that's not valuable, but I felt like there needed to be a lot more focus on the motivation with which you use those skills. Because you can have all of the knowledge, you can have like memorized all of the cognitive biases and logical fallacies in the world, but if you're not motivated to actually turn that knowledge on yourself and try to figure out, where's my own thinking biased or fallacious, and instead you're just that dude online who like comes equipped to every argument with a list of biases that he can use to like beat his opponents over the head with, your own thinking is not going to improve.
Right. So this is basically
the motivation to see things honestly and objectively is what I thought was really underappreciated.
This is basically just an indictment of the entire Western belief system, particularly when it comes to religion and politics, right?
Religion and politics are sort of two of the most susceptible topics to soldier mindset, just because they're so often like part of our identities. And so when someone disagrees with us about religion or politics, it's like, we take it personally. It's like a personal attack, like they insulted our mom.
Well,
or,
it's
stomped on our country's flag or something.
Yeah, I think in the book you mentioned the commitment consistency effect, which is, in my opinion, I think is very similar to it's very similar to the IKEA effect, which is when somebody feels they have ownership in the development of something, whether it's a product or idea, they have like some kind of intrinsic emotional attachment to it. At that point, it becomes hard to separate reality from what they actually believe, right? It makes sense, right? I mean, that's what we do. We assign disproportionate value to beliefs that we've held longer, or that somebody we respect holds, without any intent to ever challenge that belief, right?
Right. Yeah. Like even, I mean, politics and religion, there's some content there that I can understand why that tends to make us defensive or, self-righteous or combative. But any belief, if you've had to defend it against, attack, or if you've spent a long time trying to convince people of it or saying it publicly, it can just become part of your identity too, almost regardless of the content, because you've just sunk so much effort and time and, reputation into defending it.
Right.
And so I've noticed, like, even in a single like meeting or argument, I might toss off an idea without even really thinking about it. And then people start arguing with me, and then I have to defend it because now it's like my belief. It's like Julia's view that we're all debating now, even if I didn't really think about it very much at first, and might not even really have had much reason to think it was true.
I mean, that certainly is compounded with time too, right? And that's the consistency or commitment consistency effect. I think the example, I don't know if it was in the book or one of the videos I watched you, where you give the example of you get up on Sunday morning and start driving to the grocery store. You get halfway there, realize it's closed, but continue the drive anyways because already started. It may as well, but that doesn't make any fucking sense.
Right. That was actually a video I did on the sunk cost fallacy, and I was using that sort of simple example as a way to sort of show how absurd our adherence to sunk costs can be. That like obviously if you knew the grocery store was closed, you wouldn't just keep driving to it, even though like just because I've already come this far, I don't want to waste my time or waste my past investment. But we do things like that in our lives in a slightly less obvious ways too, where we're like, well, I don't really want to be a professor anymore, but I don't want to have wasted the 3 years I spent in grad school. So I guess I'll just finish and go into academia anyway, so that past time won't have been wasted.
Right.
But actually, you're making yourself worse off.
No one will defend a lie harder than someone that's wasted their entire lives believing it. That's for sure. Ray Dalio in Principle says his principle is hire slow, fire fast, and he's talking about business, but he encourages that in relationships as well. Like take time getting to know people or take time learning things, and once you realize the value is not there, jettison it immediately, because what's the point of wasting any more time on it, right?
Yeah, I interviewed a lot of entrepreneurs and managers and other people working mostly in tech companies because I wrote this book when I was out in the Bay Area. And one of the questions I tended to ask people was, looking back, what's a time in which you realize now in retrospect, you were really in soldier mindset and trying to defend something that, wasn't actually true to yourself?
O.J. Simpson. O.J. Simpson. Yep.
It's not the 90s anymore, so that didn't come up that much. But
it came up for me because that grocery store thing that you were talking about, I was living in Los Angeles forever, and I used to drive all the way to Bundy, not near my neighborhood, but he was gone.
Just in case just so you could run into OJ?
Just in case, but he was gone.
Now you have to go. He lives in Summerlin.
Yeah, in Las Vegas.
Las Vegas now, I think,
We just doxed him on air. No, I'm kidding.
I don't really care.
Sorry
too much.
to touch on a sensitive subject for you accidentally.
Totally joking. There's a signed jersey behind him. He's looking for the real killer. Still doing God's work out there. So the killer.
By the way, did you see that documentary about it was about some heist that OJ planned after he was acquitted, and they interview the guys. It was I don't know what it was. They were going to steal something from some enemy of OJ's, and OJ had recruited these 3 dudes he knew to carry it out.
It was some of his apparel that he had signed.
Terribly.
Oh,
do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, he went to prison. He went to prison for it, and they had video.
Right, yes.
Yeah, that's what he actually finally went to prison for.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So they showed in this. I can't remember the name of this documentary, but they showed footage of these just idiots that OJ hired, wandering around this hotel looking for the room of the guy they were supposed to rob, and they're completely lost and bumbling around. And then they cut to an interview with one of the dudes after the fact, and he was like, yeah, that was very stupid. That whole situation was a very stupid situation.
It was.
It reminds me of one of the opening scenes of The Big Lebowski, where those dum-dums show up at his house thinking he's a millionaire.
Yeah.
And they, the
same energy. Same energy. Yeah. But anyway, what I was going to say though is that by far the most common answer people give me, or managers give me about when they were in soldier mindset in retrospect, is when they realized they had to fire someone. And they had been lying to themselves for months, because everyone hates firing people. But as a manager, sometimes you have to. And so they always come up with some reasons that they tell themselves why. Actually, no, I'll just wait another few months, or actually, it's fine. He's not that bad. And then, in retrospect, after they finally do it, they're like, oh God, I should have fired him a year ago. So some people I talked to actually had support groups with other manager or CEO friends of theirs, and they had a policy of telling their sort of group members when there was a situation they were in where they're like, oh, I'm not sure if I should fire this guy. I think maybe I don't have to. And 9 times out of 10, their friends would all be like, no, you really do have to fire that guy.
You just got to hire the Bobs from Office Space.
Yeah.
They're available.
Yeah, they're out there.
You can find them right now.
Bob, the one with the stapler? No. Bob was the HR guy.
Yeah. They were the two interviewing everybody else.
Guys who were like, so what do you do exactly?
Yeah, what do you do exactly? So what do you call the opposite of that? Because I hate people pretty quickly. And I have, I don't know, maybe zero tolerance, whereas Dan has more patience where I'm like, let's just fire that motherfucker. I don't care. Whereas Dan, you're more measured with it.
Well, I think I should apply the same academic rigor to whether or not I should fire them to whether or not I should have hired them in the first place, right? Like just because like a lot of people do stall out on the firing process, but I'm not going to make it quicker just to go against that trend. That doesn't make any sense either. Classic.
Sure.
It's overreaction. It's where libertarianism comes from. Ayn Rand spends years behind the Iron Curtain, right? Living under abject communism bullshit. And then she comes back like, no government, ever, fuck them. Like, no, that's stupid.
Yeah.
Right? Get the fuck out of here. So I don't want to be that kind of dickhole.
Got it.
Even though she trained Alan Greenspan and he took over the American economy for a couple of decades and fucked us up. But let's move past all that. I'm going to smoke some more of this weed.
Sure.
So can one of you fire the other one of you?
No, we
try.
can't.
We try.
Yeah, we try.
So it's more like spy versus spy now, where we sabotage.
He'll throw earrings in my car, so my wife finds them, and she's like, "What the fuck? Who is this?"
Just one earring at a time, though. 2 earrings would be too suspicious. One earring seems like somebody lost something,
and they were in a hurry.
Right.
They were in a hurry to get out of there. But your book in particular, do you know what it reminds me of? Like, to be honest with you, like, is the media. I feel like I'm always on. I'm looking for the truth within the media every single day, where I'm like, what is really going on? And that scout mindset that you're talking about, I think that's my biggest application of that throughout my daily life, because we do so many shows here. Dan and I host this 5 days a week, and then each of us has 2 other shows that we do. So typically we're doing on average about 3 shows a day, right? Both of us. But when you're forced to listen and consume or you read this much media over and over and over again, I just keep getting more and more frustrated with it. Like, for example, this morning, I get up and I start my day with like 10 papers, and I try to go across the board, or websites and everything else, right? From entertainment to New York Times to you name it, right? Black Rifle Coffee was in the New York Times today. Friends of ours, one of our co-hosts is one of the owners of that company. I'll go through the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Washington Post. I'll try to go to Fox. I'll try to go to CNN. I'll try to go to Deadline. I'll try to go to The Wrap. Drudge Report.
Yeah, I look at the aggregators too. Like Google News and Drudge and anybody that aggregates news, because it's interesting to see. I think you can take the pulse of both political parties by looking at what their aggregators are doing, because they change the narrative and the headline a little bit.
Correct. And I hate to say this because I fucking hate Zuckerberg, but that Facebook news feed that is now one of the icons on the bottom of your mobile app for Facebook, their news feed is really, really good. It's and really curated for things that I like and enjoy in my life, obviously, because they're listening to me every single second of the day. They know that I only do missionary once a week, and they're able to tailor all of my shit to that. However, most of the media won't report on things that I'm like, what is going on down there? Like this morning, my biggest frustration was this Cuba thing, right? Everything that's going on down in Cuba, I feel like we're being lied to. And we don't really, they're like, the media won't share what is really happening down there. And until that All-Star game, I was watching the MLB All-Star game last night. There was a Cuban pitcher, Aroldis Chapman, who was pitching. He had written on his hat, SOS Cuba. And that kind of started to trend later on. And it turned out this SOS Cuba thing has been going on for the last few days because of the protests and everything else. And I'm like, well, great. The media told me that it was over COVID initially. Now they're not saying anything. What the fuck is going on with Cuba, and why can't I find this? Because this is a massive, massive story. Because right around maybe 20 minutes later, somebody from, not the Department of Defense, but like Homeland Security got on and said, don't come here if you're planning on leaving Cuba. Stay in your country. You got to stay there or whatever. I don't understand why, but it's fine if you come through Mexico, I guess. Like, that's my frustration every single morning is that. And that's where I'm trying to apply what you're writing about every single day, where I'm like, what is the truth? Will I ever find it? Probably not, but I guess that's what keeps it going every day.
I think the scout mindset is not necessarily about outward-facing stuff, but inward-facing stuff. Like, how am I applying this Socratic method to my own beliefs on a day-to-day basis? And I think one of the premises of the book is that our general thinking on leadership is that the leaders are strong, firm in their beliefs, whatever the fuck that is, right? But in science, that's never been the case. Like, yeah, maybe they're firm in the things that we all agree upon at the time, but a real scientist, whether it be, physics or social sciences, is going to constantly question everything they believe. Otherwise, if you're not doing that, then you're full of shit, frankly, right?
Yeah. So let's take you, for example. When you read the news or watch the news, or do you, first of all, I guess I should ask that question.
Not as much as it sounds like you do, but some, yeah.
What is your thoughts when you read it? Like, are you like in the belief of like, yeah, most of this seems real and I'm fine with everything that's been reported today?
No, I'd say I'm somewhere in between that and your and the reaction you described when you're reading the news of like, God, you're all lying to me.
Yes.
I mean, often I'm looking for patterns where like there are certain news stories where I've like learned over time just through checking that yes, this source, like the New York Times, is pretty reliable on this topic or like this domain, and then other domains where like actually I just can't take at face value anything they say like on this topic. Like, I don't know, when the New York Times covers tech companies, I feel like I can't trust, I mean, maybe like literal facts that they report, like this company, had this IPO in this date. Okay, yes, they're going to be accurate about that for the most part. Although even having said that, whenever I read stories about something I know about personally, like they wrote an article on a company that my friend runs, or they wrote an article about me or something, there's always a bunch of small to medium and occasionally large errors, or just like shoehorning things in to fit a narrative. And I can see how they, picked and chose what they told people to like fit the narrative. That I have to kind of keep that in mind when I'm reading articles about things I don't know anything about. Right. Have you heard of this? It's called the Murray-Gell-Mann amnesia effect. That like people will read a news article about something they know about personally, and they'll be able to see how kind of wrong or flawed or incomplete it is. But then they forget that when they're reading articles about things they don't know about, and they just assume like, oh, well, this is totally accurate, and they take it at face value.
That's interesting. So I don't do that.
Yeah.
I do exactly what you do.
Yeah, I mean, maybe you're an exception.
Well, I mean, we do it professionally though, so we kind of have to dial in a little more. But I do that for sure, and I think I call it like intellectual Kentucky windage. Kentucky windage is a phrase about shooting rifles. So if you don't have a scope that you can set, you shoot your rifle and you can see that it lands in a certain direction. Like, okay, cool, I'll just move it up a little bit and shoot it now, right? So I guess the offset, but in this case, it's like an offset of honesty. So I know that Washington Post is owned by Jeff Bezos. They're not going to be honest about other tech companies that do web services. There's no way, right? They're always going to frame that, even if it's subtly in some kind of negative way against anybody other than Amazon. And why wouldn't they? Make sense. I mean, I think it's immoral that they do that and unethical, but it is what I expect it, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm trying to avoid here is just becoming reflexively skeptical, where I just don't trust anything that I read, no matter what, because that way lies madness. So instead, when I say I'm looking for patterns, I'm trying to figure out like, what the offsets are, what domains I can trust, and what other domains I have to sort of read conflicting sources to verify. So I'm trying to be a little smarter about how I consume the news, as opposed to like reflexively trusting or reflexively skeptical.
Yeah, because for me, it's maddening where I'm just like, can I just go one place? I don't want to spend all day trying to figure out the truth every day. Just give me the facts of what is actually going on. If it's an op-ed piece, great. I know it's an opinion. Versus somebody else, a journalist who's writing it and saying this is fact, no, this is incorrect. Versus an op-ed piece. If it says op-ed at the top, I'm all right, great. That is somebody's opinion and I'm in on it. With a podcast, it's the same way.
Right.
I'm not saying what we say every single day is gospel. We're here to give an opinion because that's what podcasts are. And hopefully you align with some of our beliefs or views or guests or whatever it is. But this is all our opinion here. That's why we can get away with what we say. I'm not a real fucking journalist. Like not even close. I want to leave that to the professionals. But when the professionals have let us down, then, you're seeking your own truth. And then that's where you get this 50-50 divide on everything. Across the board, like you were talking about earlier, politics, religion, race, all of it. Like you get this huge division because nothing you read is believable to one side or the other. Yeah.
Another kind of thought experiment I do when I'm reading a news article, which maybe you guys already do something like this, or maybe it'll be helpful to you to hear it, is I'll ask myself, so I'll take an example. Like, say there's an article about some tech company being sexist, and the article, tells some anecdotes of women at the tech company who, I don't know, feel they were passed over for promotion due to their sex, or who encountered some like example of sexual harassment or something like that. I'll ask myself, like, suppose the narrative was false. Like, suppose this company wasn't any more sexist than any other company. How likely is it that a journalist would have been able to find these anecdotes? And in some cases, I end up concluding, actually, it's not that unlikely that you would be able to find some stories in like a company of thousands of people in which a woman was passed over for promotion, either, she feels it was because of her gender, or actually it was because of her gender. And yet that's not necessarily strong evidence that the company is more sexist than any other company, just because if you're looking for those anecdotes, you can find them.
Yeah. Yes. Dan and I chatted about this the other day, and it was regarding the COVID numbers with the new like Delta variant. And they're like, man, 42% of all cases are this Delta variant. Great, but what's the actual number? Because I can't find that in the article.
Well, the coverage from the very beginning of this stuff, it originally went, and they're going to go by whatever number is most frightening to people, right?
Yes, yes.
The first number was the infection rate, or the number of infections. Then it went to the rate of increase of infections, and then it went back to the number of infections, and then it started with deaths. And then when the deaths weren't as much as they wanted, it was the increase of deaths week over week, percentage-wise or number-wise, whichever was bigger, right? And then it went back to the number of infections. Right now, you don't hear anything about deaths or hospitalizations. So if you read CNN today and any of their Delta or
so I did, which is why I brought this up. Yeah, I was reading that today.
Yeah, they won't mention hospitalizations unless it's a percentage increase in a very specific, like all these places have increases. The one that CNN wrote this, I think yesterday, it said that these 40-some cities, mostly in the South, who have lower vaccination rates, are experiencing upticks and blah, blah, blah. It gave no real examples of any hospitalization except for one city. And they were it was like 140 or something like that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's...
And so for what you were saying
it's kind of ridiculous. It's for anybody that doesn't routinely suspend their disbelief. That is a hard thing to, like, okay, man, it's you're telegraphing your bullshit now. At least try harder to hide it from me.
Yeah. And so when I looked at that number of 40%, like, that's scary and it sounds scary. I had to go through 3 other sources to try to find out what the actual number of infections was. And it was 21,000. I mean, my God, man.
But again, infection versus
38 million people that live in California. It was regarding California.
We don't report on the infection levels of most things because there's no true negative outcome, right? So if they're not reporting on the infection plus the negative outcome, then the infection has no context. To me, at least. It doesn't make any sense. Now, I don't know. I mean, it's obvious. What is it? If it bleeds, it leads. That's their premise over there.
Yeah.
So whatever. What are you gonna do? I mean, it's not just them.
So, yeah.
It's not them.
So like
the
generalizable rule here, I guess, is ask yourself what other, like, there's one number that was reported, presumably because it's, sounds shocking or it fits the narrative or whatever. And then you ask yourself, what are other numbers that they could have reported if those numbers had, been more appealing to them?
Right.
And then check those numbers to see maybe they tell a different story.
Like if there's been 100% increase in infections, it went from 1 to 2. Thanks.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
right.
The context is important, more so in math than any other field, right?
Yeah.
Right.
But whatever.
Yeah.
We don't care about math in this
or
country.
like, yeah. Another rule that I try to follow when I'm reading statistics reported in the news is just trying to figure out how are they defining this thing? Like, I don't know. An example is I saw an article a couple years ago saying that 10% of UC Berkeley students were homeless in the past year. And so like right away, a radar started beeping in my head that was like, that seems really high.
Yeah.
That's very high. And so I like followed some links to figure out, well, what do they mean by homeless? And it turned out the definition they were using was if you have stayed with family or friends in the past year, as opposed to, leasing or owning your own place, then you count it as homeless.
Yeah, but
average, like by that definition, I was homeless after college because I stayed with my parents for a few months before getting in place.
The average American used to move out of their parents' home by 22. Right now, I think the average is 26 and a half. So that means that's 4.5 years after college. Even if you're in a graduate program, you're still outside of that unless you're getting a PhD, right?
Yeah.
So I guess everybody's fucking homeless then.
Yeah. I don't know if that's the official definition that every place uses, or it's just but anyway, there's a lot of things like that where you read a number, and if you're like actually paying attention, you're like, that sounds way too high or way too low or implausible. And then you look into the definition of how they got the number, and it's not at all, what people would have assumed it was, which is, I guess, what they're counting on. But yeah, I mean, I agree this is exhausting to do on an everyday basis. So what I think the only like intellectually honest thing to do, if you're not going to spend every second of your life researching everything, is just to have big like error bars around the conclusions that you draw from things that you haven't looked into very much. So like if I read an article about nutrition, I don't know a lot about nutrition. I know a little bit, enough to know that it's a pretty messy field. Like there's not a lot of really reliable experiments that we've done that give us really reliable information. And so if I see something reported like, I don't know, drinking red wine will prevent cancer or something, I may not know for sure that that's not true because I'm not going to look into it, but I'm going to have big error bars around that conclusion. I'll be like, yeah, maybe. Just based on priors, I think that's, there's a significant chance that's wrong, but I'm not looking into it.
That's something that is intended to be built into pretty much every research study that's done. I mean, limitations. If you're doing a research paper of any kind, like the limitations section is paramount. Like, yeah, we studied all this stuff. Here are our conclusions. Here are some of the limitations we feel. And that's part of the peer review process as well. When you send your paper out. In theory,
the ideal, Although you'd be shocked, like when you actually read the papers, which I did a lot of reading papers in the process of researching the book. I feel like there's a lot of kind of bait and switch happening, even from the researchers themselves, not like the press reporting the results, but the researchers themselves. So they'll have their disclaimers. They'll be like, no, of course, this study is only correlational and we can't infer causality just from this correlation we've observed. So they say that, they're like checking all their boxes like good, responsible scientists. But then when they, just in the same discussion section of the same paper, they'll use causal language. Like, and so of course, as we found, such and such causes an increase in happiness. And you're like, no, it's not, you can't infer causality. You just said it yourself. Right. But they just kind of slide between the, the weaker, cautious conclusion that they can actually defend and the stronger, like attention grabbing conclusion that makes people want to cover their work. And so this is not just a problem, in the media and the media trying to sensationalize things. It's a problem all the way down to the more fundamental level of the scientists doing the research.
Isn't that, what is that? Yeah. Isn't that the association fallacy where you say one premise and then you branch off of that, and because people believe that as a standard, they'll start to believe your next statement is a standard. I can't remember exactly what it's called. I think it's something like that. But anyways, yeah, that's stupid. We, I think it was it last week or the week before, we had Peter Boghossian on?
Yep.
And he was one of those guys, I don't know if you follow the guy, but he was one of the people that submitted all those fake research papers, mostly about woke stuff. And it was just, it's pretty much every side. The peer review process, the institutions, the universities themselves, and the authors of these papers are often, they have an axe to grind. There's a point to prove. It's almost like when you introduced profit motive into healthcare and into education, you can see where that inevitably goes, right? People with, some kind of motivation, financial motivation or whatever, are going to start to interject things, and they turn it into a moral battle of some sort. Like, it's not just about I'm right and you're wrong. It's that I'm right and you're wrong for being wrong. You know what I mean? That's where it comes down to. And that's just, at that point, you're operating off of your own premise as being correct, and confirmation bias takes over everything from then on. You can justify anything. If you believe, it's like believing in God. If you truly believe that your kids are going to go to hell, if I believe my kid's going to go to hell because you're Catholic or whatever, and your kid is teaching my kid about whatever, I'm going to be willing to segregate my kid from your kid, or even fucking fight you to stop that from happening. If you truly believe that they're going to spend eternity in hell for that, right?
Yeah,
that's a problem to think that way.
Oh yeah, and then the other problem that you were talking about earlier was scientists is all of their money is dependent upon some funding from some higher up. And if you don't agree with all of the personal beliefs and opinions of whoever is paying you to do this research, you don't get any funding. So the funding is pulled if you're a scientist. And we've had a lot on the show, even, Neil deGrasse Tyson and all those guys have been on the show. And it's one of those things where, we ask them the same question every time. And they're like, well, luckily I'm not dependent upon government funding. right? Or because it goes both ways, and I'm not talking about politically. Look, it's all cyclical. There will be a Republican and then a Democrat, and vice versa. But you still have to say and do the right things, depending upon whoever's in office. Either it's a local or state government, or it's the federal government, to get this funding and continue your research and make a living for yourself. Therefore, maybe some of the things that you're reporting on might not be the most accurate, but it's accurate to people who want to hear it up top.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't even have to be a political motive for like directing your research. Just whatever you as a researcher have kind of built your career around demonstrating. Like, I don't know, take the power pose lady, Amy Cuddy a few years ago, who had this super popular TED Talk about how if you stand like a superhero in what she called a power pose, then it gives you more confidence and makes you more successful, et cetera, et cetera. And, the research that was based on was, it didn't hold up. Like, people tried to replicate it and didn't really get the same result. And of course she'd staked a lot of her reputation. She'd like kind of trapped herself in the commitment and consistency effect that you were talking about, by making that, like, building her sort of public facing career around that. And so she kind of had to double down. I mean, not technically had to, but I understand why she felt she had to double down and, find rationalizations for why the effect was still real despite the failed replications and so on. And so that's not really a political thing. That's just like, you as a researcher have a motive to, try to prove that the effect you're claiming is real is actually real.
Stephen Hawking did that for years with the Hawking information paradox, right? Like, his premise was, he did a lot of the foundational research on black holes. And his premise was, what if, in this multiverse theory, the black hole's pulling all of the information out of our universe and into somewhere else or whatever, right? Information is being lost out of the universe, which is a no-no, right, in physics. He leaned on that for years. Well, metaphorically.
Didn't he change his mind eventually?
He did, yeah. Eventually he admitted he was wrong about it, but it took a good decade of that. And just it wasn't just a decade of that being out there and, he got lit the fuck up on a regular basis by pretty much everybody else in physics. Yeah. You know what I mean? And that's, I would say for most guys that are that deep into physics, that's probably your entire life. So that's, you definitely are going to get defensive about that. For this guy, it was his entire life. Right.
Yeah.
So,
and to be fair, there's often a very fuzzy, unclear line between, motivated reasoning soldier mindset is my metaphor, but the term that cognitive psychologists would use is motivated reasoning or directionally motivated reasoning, where you're, reasoning, trying to come to a particular conclusion, kind of predetermined. And so, there's often a fine line between that and just sort of being unwilling to give up on a hypothesis because you genuinely think it has merit and it's not worth giving up on yet. And there's no like hard and fast rule that you can look to decide when you're engaging in soldier mindset versus when you're, like correctly continuing to investigate a theory. But, the general rule to try to pay attention to is whether you actually want to hear evidence that contradicts your theory and whether you are actually, proactively going out of your way to, put your theory to the test and, find ways to disprove it if it can be disproven. So if you're not doing any of those things and you're, only doing experiments or only collecting evidence that could support your theory, and you're deliberately not engaging with critics of the theory, then I think that should set off warning bells in your head.
That's just confirmation bias at that point. It's weird. It's weird how I don't know how it happened. I would love to delve into this at some point with a combination of historians and social psychologists, but I wonder at what point it became there was some social value to being right first.
On what? On anything?
On anything, right? So there seems to be no tolerance. The way things work, the natural way things work, is everyone is either ignorant or wrong until they're right. That's how it works, right? You're in a position of ignorance or incorrectness.
Just definitionally.
Just by existing. Yeah. And then everyone who has ever existed becomes right as they learn new evidence, or sometimes it's discovery or whatever it is. But then you become right. But there's no tolerance for being wrong, which is the standard. That doesn't make any fucking sense to me. And then people like to become right and then immediately start dancing on the graves of everyone who was in their position 30 seconds ago. So
Right.
why is there social value in that? And the converse of that is because there's social value in it. It's one of the points you make is that in the soldier mindset, as you call it, finding out you're wrong feels like being defeated. But it's not.
Right.
That's not it. You won by becoming right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it boggles my fucking mind. I've never
No.
understood that.
Exactly. I was trying to figure out people, and this includes most or all of us at some certain times, people who feel like, being proven wrong by the universe is a personal defeat or is shameful in some way. What's going on there? And I think part of it is just a difference in how people think about what it means to be right or wrong. And the people who feel like they've suffered a humiliating defeat when they're wrong, they, I think, have this implicit assumption that if you're doing things right, you should just have a perfectly accurate map of the world. Right. And if your map is ever wrong, that means you've failed in some way. So like by, being wrong means definitionally that you did something wrong. And that's just not the case. Like if you actually think about it, that's completely unrealistic. Like even the smartest human in the world has limited time and limited information and limited computational power. And there's no way you could be right about everything, even if you were a complete genius spending all of your time thinking about what's true.
Right.
And so, if you instead have this perspective where, all of us have maps of the world that are incomplete and are going to have some, error bars and question marks on them and are going to need to be revised as you learn more information, then finding out you were wrong about something is not a defeat at all. Like,
it's ridiculous to even think that being wrong. And we also, for some reason, have associated being ignorant with being wrong. And that just means you don't know. So I was in the military, I was in the infantry. There's something called troop leading procedures that we go by. The first thing you do is you receive a mission and then you issue a warning order, right? Which is like, hey, we've got something going on. Let's go. Start taking care of it. Then you make a tentative plan and you start moving towards the plan, right? Then the next two steps are to conduct recon and then finalize the plan, right? So we go into this situation half-cocked, knowing that we're going to have to fucking do more research and finalize our plan. So the most intense version of the Socratic method, in my opinion, is this military operation where I have to go on limited information and then through academic rigor and research, discover more, and then make my plan. That is the standard for the most intense version of this. And for some reason, there's no social reward for that. And I think you mentioned that in the book as well, that one of the ways, and Peter Boghossian mentioned this on our show a couple of weeks ago, rewarding people or praising people for changing their mind when new evidence is presented is something that's going to be a big deal in the future, right? And correcting this curve of madness that we're on right now, I think. I mean, there's no social benefit to changing your mind and becoming right. If somebody says something stupid in the media, that's what they're known for then, right? Or if you're wrong about something, you become known for being wrong. But we're all wrong about everything. This guy just got exposed for it, I guess. I don't even know if that's the right word.
Yeah, but if you look at what we're going through as a nation or people and all that shit, with social media, you have the ability to tell everyone they were wrong immediately and get 50,000 people to agree with you and be like, yeah, fuck that person. Or if you were right or whatever, and then, then you're forced into apologies later that you don't really want to make or something else. Like, social media gives you that instant gratification of telling somebody they're right or they're wrong, siding with them immediately, and then that's going to fuck up people's mindsets as well, where they're like, oh, shit, I'm so afraid to be wrong because people are going to jump down my throat that maybe I just won't voice my opinion or...
And by the way, when there's an intrinsic part of your research methodology that pushes out data, you're going to fail. You will fail always. Like the more data that comes into your fucking your algorithmic engine, if you want to call it that, the better you are, right? Because if the algorithm is sound, then it'll weed out the bad data anyways, And if it's not sound, then you need to fix the goddamn thing. You can't fix a hole or a bucket with holes in it until you pour water in to see where they are.
Yeah, and even this morning, like there was this trend on Twitter, because I always check those as well. What's trending in the top, 20 or 30 things, topics. One of them.
Are yours really random? Mine are always completely random.
No, I think mine are. I set mine on like what the top in the United States are. You can
maybe
set
it's because I have a VPN and it thinks I'm from a different place every day or something. So
that's exactly
anyway,
what it is. Yes, that's exactly. So we have VPNs as well. ExpressVPN.com/Drinkin Bros is ours. But on there, you can still go in there and set United States if you want to, and then have that be your trending topic. So one of them this morning was "Don't Fauci my Florida," and that was the hashtag, and people were writing this, and it was in regards to the governor DeSantis like selling merch or something against that "Don't Fauci my Florida" thing, and what the ethics were surrounding it. Now with Fauci in particular, that guy has been wrong 1,000 times, right? And I hate that this is going back to COVID again, but I'm just taking the most public figure and what is still going on in a day-to-day basis. He's been wrong 1,000 times, right? But he's never said, "Hey, I was incorrect on this." And that's what drives me crazy, where I think he would be a more likable person and a more believable person if he just said, "Look, none of us really knew, and it's going to take some time for all of this stuff, and we're all kind of figuring it out as we go. I'm going to get some things wrong. You're going to get some things wrong."
But to be fair to Fauci, he's operating within the system we've all created and agreed to allow to exist, which is one where there's no tolerance for being wrong, particularly when it comes to science and the way it affects people's lives. But that is what science is.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
I think that's so I looked into this a bit for my book, and I don't think I ended up writing about this because there was too much to cover, but there's actually, I hear that a lot, that the public doesn't want to hear any uncertainty from public, science communicators or public health experts, et cetera. But actually, from all the studies I've looked at, it's more of a bimodal thing, where a significant fraction of the public doesn't want to hear any uncertainty, and they'll lose trust in or lose patience with experts if they say something is uncertain. But then another really significant fraction appreciates acknowledgments of uncertainty and say it increases their trust in the experts. And it varies from study to study, but they're like roughly equal percentages. And I don't know what determines it. Maybe it's amount of education, or maybe it's a personality disposition type thing. But I've wondered now whether this belief that the entire public doesn't want to hear uncertainty is it's like oversimplified, and maybe public health experts like Fauci are deferring too much to that view, and they're like leaving value on the table where they could be talking about uncertainty without suffering much of a cost, and they're just failing to do so because they think they can't.
Well, of course they are, because that's how every institution operates these days. Whether you're talking about the university institution, media, companies in general, they all default towards this loud minority of folks who they feel like are, I mean, it's essentially in marketing the opposite of a firebrand, right? So your firebrand are your most loyal customers. They are force multipliers. You give them the best deals because they'll wear your shit out in public. They'll proselytize on your behalf and blah blah blah. Then you have the opposite of that, which are just assholes on Twitter, mostly, right? Yeah. The woke crowd or whoever it is, the offended Olympics, whatever you want to call it, they have the opposite effect of that. And just like politicians, those people only have power when people allow them to have power. Right. That is an unnatural and assumed power that only exists because you allow it to. It's like fear, right? Like it only exists because you allow it to exist. And so Charles Barkley's a good example. He made a bunch of fucking flippant comments, I think about fat girls in San Antonio or something.
Yes.
And people were like, fucking TNT should fire him. And Charles Barkley's like, shut the fuck up.
Yeah,
but joke. Shut up.
Even a couple weeks ago, he just said, "Look, man, I don't know how much longer I'm going to be able to last." Because
but he's fine.
I think so, but even he's starting to question it. And like, you take sports gambling, right? That's another one, because we host a sports show and we gamble on all the sports, right? And I post the picks in a separate like private group of Drinkin Bros Sports. And dude, I do that before the game starts. That way, it's like, hey, I'm either going to get this right or I'm going to get this wrong. There's no in between.
Good for you.
Yes, but I also have no problem saying I missed that one. Or I was incorrect on that one. I don't know why so many people have it. I literally think it's the fear of social media and like, fuck you, I hate you. All people, I don't care how anti-social or whatever the fuck you think you are,
all people assign some social value to that, to being correct or to not being embarrassed at least, right?
Yeah.
Like the biggest fear that men have is that a woman will embarrass them publicly. That's one of the top 5 fears that men have.
Oh yeah,
Straight men.
Yes.
Anyways. Why? Who gives a fuck about all these assholes that you're never going to meet? They have nothing to do with you. Most people know like 20 to 100 people they hang out with on a regular basis, 3 to 10 people. Yeah. Those are the people that you should fucking care about. But we don't think that way now, especially with social media. It's just amplified that effect.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's dopamine though, right? There's a dopamine hit when somebody accepts you. Like when you're right, you feel good about it. So maybe it's just natural to feel that way. Maybe we've been programmed that way. Through culture or something like that. I don't know, but it is some of the more, it's so toxic because the downstream effects are that nothing means anything anymore. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, I'm living my truth, that phrase. No, you're not. You're living in fucking reality, asshole.
Yeah, or what you want everybody else to see that what your
like, you should
truth
respect
is.
my truth. Like, no.
Yeah.
No.
I love for you to
respect evidence. Evidence is what I respect.
Like Instagram. Go to Instagram and find anybody who posts like positive shit, like a hot girl who's just
they're
like
deeply depressed.
all of them.
Yeah,
I'd love to see a real study on that. Go and see how many of those girls are depressed.
All the super toxic fucking Instagram girls are also giving out relationship advice to everybody else. You don't have to take that from no man or whatever the fuck they're saying. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that really kills me because there's this common belief that I ran into a lot when I was talking to people in writing the book and afterwards too, which is that like they just equate positivity with self-deception. And so they're like, well, you know, seeing things accurately or objectively is bad because you need to be positive. And those two things don't have to be at odds. Like you can see the world realistically and objectively and be honest with yourself and still be really positive. People just assume that like, in order to be positive, you have to shut out all truth if it contradicts what you want to believe. But there's so many ways to like cheer yourself up or comfort yourself or, you know, feel good about the world without lying to yourself. So that was one of my motives, actually. You asked earlier, like, what was my motive in writing the book? One of my motives was to try to show people that like truth does not have to be in conflict with happiness and positivity.
Why would it be?
But yeah.
Why would it be? I mean, like if you went to a doctor, right, and you've got cancer, and they're like, you know, you've got cancer, you know, it's going to be all right, though. It'll be fine. No big deal. Like, that doesn't help you at all. No, give me the fucking facts and let me figure this shit out. Let's use reality to combat reality because you can't use fiction to combat reality. It just doesn't work that way. You're. I
mean, it works a little bit temporarily at least, which is why I think people do it, but it's not a great solution in the long run. And it's like certainly not the best solution. No. There's like much better ways to deal with bad news or like inconvenient truths that don't involve denial or, you know, lying to yourself.
For me, it is far better to grasp the universe as it really is than to persist in delusion, however satisfying and reassuring. That's Carl Sagan. He's a pretty smart dude.
That's a great quote.
Yeah, well, he loves Carl Sagan. Yeah.
What I find is that people often have this false dichotomy in their minds where they're like, well, you know, either you can like torture yourself with regret over the mistakes you've made in the past, or you can, you know, tell yourself a little white lie and say you didn't make a mistake at all, and then you can be happy. That's like almost a quote that I'm remembering from a psychology book. But those are never your only two choices. Like it's completely possible to acknowledge to yourself that you made a mistake or you could have done things better in the past and not torture yourself with regret. You can just, you know, remind yourself that you're getting better over time or remind yourself that everyone makes mistakes. And those are true things that are also comforting. You don't have to resort to false things to comfort yourself. So anyway, I'll get off my soapbox.
No, it's fine. It's fine. I want to get weird with you for a sec. Do you? Okay. Because you're out in Silicon Valley, right? You're out there in the Bay Area.
I'm no longer actually. I'm doing the digital nomad thing now, but I was in the Bay Area for like 6 years.
Do you do a lot of drugs when you're writing and stuff like that?
No.
You were about to say something.
There's definitely
no.
More.
Short answer, no.
What's the longer answer?
Not when I'm writing.
The longer answer is not really.
Smoking weed?
No.
And the reason I ask, it wasn't to be like, you know, hilarious like I always am or anything. It's simply when you're trying to think of a topic or wrap your mind around it that is this big, man, you could really get swallowed up. I mean, just thinking about this out loud right now, you could really get swallowed up in all of this to where you're like, does any of this make any sense? Who the fuck am I talking to as a writer
is truth
here?
Anyway?
Yes, that's exactly like, because I write and it's like, dude, I couldn't imagine writing something this heady where you're just sitting there all day and you're like, fuck, man, is anybody going to understand this? And who's my audience for this and why? And then you could get buried in a rabbit hole.
I feel very seen right now. To use a Bay Area jargon, I feel seen.
I lived in
I mean,
Oakland
some earlier drafts of my book had whole long digressions on like what we mean by truth, or like what does it mean to believe something. And those are genuine, important questions to wrestle with. But like there's an 80-20 rule that I eventually that I eventually landed on, which is like, if the like common sense definition of truth or belief or whatever works 80% of the time, and it's like 20% easier or 20% as difficult to to stick to that, then that's good enough, and I don't need to like go into a philosophical digression about every term that I use. But it's tempting.
Because I mean, it's such a big topic to wrap your mind around that. One would think you're doing some mushrooms or something to try to expand and
it might have been easier if I was. Instead, I just have, that meme where Charlie from It's Always Sunny is like gesturing at the board where he's got all these random like connections.
It's
that was me like in my bedroom for the 2 years that I was working on the book.
Pepe
like,
Sylvia.
Beliefs and truth and philosophy and motivated reasoning.
It's Pepe Sylvia is the guy he's looking for, and it's for years nobody knew what it meant. He was just mispronouncing the word Pennsylvania because he's illiterate.
What?
In front of all the mail.
No.
That was
is that when he and Mac got a job at the company?
They take one job simultaneously to get health insurance, and they completely fuck it up. Mac goes on a Secret of My Success pathway like Michael J. Fox. Charlie goes down to the basement and completely loses his mind. Which is about, I mean, that's how it goes, right?
But that's writing, when you're doing shit like this. Luckily, like the majority of mine is comedy, so it's like, all right, great. Is this funny or not? Great. Moving on. I don't have to do shit like that. But man, what's your next book then? Like if this is,
So I've been interested for a while, and I didn't really cover this much in the book because there's too much to cover, but I've been interested in reasoning at the group level and not just at the individual level. So like the Scout mindset is mostly about, you as an individual, you want to be more, see the world more accurately, be better at figuring things out. Honestly, how do you do that as an individual? But a lot of decisions and a lot of scientific inquiry and work at companies, innovation is at the group level. And so one thing I was doing for a couple of years before COVID hit was holding kind of group discussions between people with different perspectives on something like, I don't know, housing policy in the Bay Area, or potential risks from artificial intelligence, or are tech companies making our lives worse? Questions like that. So I would find people who had were either experts or had thought a lot about a particular topic and had different views, and bring them together for a night and see if we could kind of triangulate our way towards the truth together. And also, could I learn sort of best practices for doing that make it work? Because it's a very non-trivial thing to do. So I don't feel like I have any super clear, complete answers yet. But if I write another book, I think it'll be about truth seeking at the group level, and
I bet
best practices for doing that.
I bet Sam Harris would be a good resource for that. His work on cognitive behavior and how the reason people come to believe things is very, very good. I don't like he like anybody else says a lot of stuff, right? And a lot of people, because he spent the first part of his career being pretty harsh towards things, some people think he's just a dick for no reason, but he's actually pretty fucking smart. I mean, he's a relatively conservative guy that went hard on Trump the whole time because of his rhetoric and shit. So he's
is he even conservative? Like, I don't even know what counts anymore as conservative or liberal.
He's a classical liberal, which is conservative. It's conservative right now, and 10 years from now it'll be fucking liberal again. Right. It's just, we're all
I was having this argument with someone about whether a certain blogger was conservative or liberal. And I was like, he's a mix, but he seems pretty liberal to me, because then I listed all these liberal positions. And the person was like, yeah, but he, is like, he has like conservative views on race or something. And I was like, well, maybe, but that's one thing compared to these like 20 views he has liberal opinions on. The person was like, it doesn't matter. If you have conservative views on race, then you're a conservative. Like that's the one issue that defines whether you're conservative or liberal.
But you see, you're right. Even right now in your reasoning, when you're talking to this person, you personally are using that set of facts that aren't really facts, right? So these 12 bullet points that make you conservative or liberal on either side
are made up by somebody.
We just made that shit up. And I've mentioned this on the show a couple of times recently. Russell Brand on his Instagram the other day. His show's pretty interesting, right?
Oh yeah,
his
it's great.
Podcast.
It's great.
It's on Luminary, so nobody watches it. They only see him on Instagram. But one of the points he made was, people keep calling me, and this is in response to people saying that Rogan is a fucking far right guy now as well.
Right.
He said people keep referring to me as like flipping over to the conservative side or whatever now. It's like my positions haven't changed in 25 years. Mm-hmm. Like my core positions, which are like equality and blah, 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 whatever else. Equality, honesty, like truth in journalism, things like that. They haven't ever changed. So how is it that I'm being labeled differently now and I'm the same, right? It's like there's two spheres and the outside one's spinning, and we're determining what our geolocation is based on the external sphere and not the internal sphere. Doesn't make any sense.
There's no objective measure of conservative or liberal. It's all just relative to the people around you. So I don't know. It makes sense to me that he could count as a conservative now if everyone else became more liberal.
Well, that's why.
But even that, I think, is partly a function of just, the online discourse bubble has changed a lot, whereas the country as a whole hasn't changed nearly as much.
Well, that's why I reject the idea of political parties in general. I think it's ludicrous to think that one group is going to get everything right. Why would they? That's why we have multiple groups, motherfucker. That's the entire point of having additional data. That would be like, well, my telescope data is better than your radio telescope data. Like, really? That doesn't make any fucking sense. The data is the goddamn data.
Right.
If people need shit, we need to get it to them. If we have a problem financially getting it to them or infrastructurally getting it to them, we have to fix that problem first, and so on and so forth. Yeah. Why is that so fucking hard to believe?
Yeah. Well, go ahead. It'll never change. So I think we've gone too far. I think it as a society we've gone. I don't agree with that.
I think there's stuff happening right now. So back in the day, in throughout human civilization, there have been small pockets of what would be today the intellectual dark web, right? Mm-hmm. Like the best thinkers on earth who are literally committed to truth, stepping outside of government and business and any kind of form of control and trying to decide what's going on. Back in the day, they would get persecuted for it, and now they will too. But they had no platform. If you got persecuted, you had no platform. The Catholic Church would send you off to an island somewhere, or whomever else would murder you or whatever it is. Now, right, these people can literally self-produce their own digital content and put it out like Weinstein's Portal and a variety of other institutions now. I think, and Boghossian agrees with this, there's more power right now to start changing the way people think, not what they think, but how they think, than ever before in human history.
But I think the issue of why I say it's not going to change is until you get these people, these independent thinkers, into government positions, I don't know. Everybody's going to stick to their side, and I'm right, you're wrong. Here's why. And it's just shit, man. Since I've been alive, it hasn't changed. And you keep fighting for it and wanting it and hoping for it, but it just hasn't. And even the shit people are talking about Biden, and we do it all the time on this show of like the dude's fucking dead. That was Reagan in the last term of his, it's
hilarious to me that conservatives continue to heroize Reagan, who didn't fucking believe in small government. Clearly, he raised taxes in 5 out of the 8 years he was in office, started the Star Wars program, tripled the national debt, committed 286 people from his administration were indicted after the fact, okay? So he wasn't the law and order fucking conservative, economic conservative guy everybody thought he was in real life. And the last 2 or 3 years of his presidency, he was out to lunch.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
So it's the same thing. It's the same cycle, but until we get somebody in there or into these political positions that is a free thinker and is able to talk like this, how does it change? We get hit up all the time, every day, by some politician wanting to be on the show to pound the stump for something, right? Yeah. Rarely do we have them on. It's not that we're against it, but we've been bitten in the ass by it, by a couple of them.
Why? What happened?
Adam Kinzinger was one of them that we had on. That's he came on with a certain set of views, and then magically those views changed 4 years later when his guy, the guy wasn't in office anymore, and maybe you're going for re-election, and things aren't so popular anymore.
Well, I mean, he's a microcosm of society at large, which is
correct.
People get backed into a corner where they feel like they have to choose sides, and they always choose people instead of principles every single time. It's fucking stupid. It is fucking stupid. If you believe in something, then it should be true whether or not some other person validates it or not, unless there's actual evidence. Right, you shouldn't move on that position. So why would you? Right, it doesn't make any sense. So he felt the need to position himself against Trump, right? Which is fine. I mean, I don't really give a shit one way or the other. I'm not a Trump supporter of any sort, but the way he did it was so obvious. It was the same way that Matt Gaetz aligned himself with Trump. Right, it's just like it's weakness. Right? It's cowardice, in my opinion. It's intellectual weakness where you have to align yourself with larger groups to hear the things that you need to hear to continue going forward. That's just pussy bullshit to me.
Yes,
right?
and again, like I said before, until you get some of these free independent thinkers into politics or into positions of power to get their thoughts out in the air, and then, oh, all right, great. Yeah, that's totally different. I've never heard anything like that. That's amazing. Then you're going to be relegated to podcasts and things like that. And I mean, dude, in a million years, Julia, did you think you'd be on a show called Drinkin' Bros promoting?
I would have assigned low probability to it, and I would have been wrong.
But for real, but
yeah.
We enjoy that. We enjoy these thoughts and open-mindedness and things like that. So like, why can't everybody else? I don't know, man.
I mean, not to like puncture the cynicism too much here, but even if like the average, like, the modal person is not super interested in being open-minded or, hearing views that conflict with theirs, there's still like very large pockets online and to some degree in real life of people who, are actually going to be impressed if you change your mind or aren't going to, try to shame you for saying you're uncertain about something or ignorant about something. And so I try to encourage people to like gravitate towards those pockets and like, don't just keep following people on Twitter who are dogmatic and then complain about it. Like actually try to change your, curate your internet experience so that it's, making you smarter instead of dumber and, making it easier for you to be a scout instead of a soldier. Because you can do that to a large extent.
You can, but the algorithms are against you.
Like dogmatic people out there, but you don't have to give them your time and attention. You can, curate a better experience for yourself.
The algorithms are not in our favor for that. Yeah, but
this isn't. You're also operating under the assumption that this is some kind of new situation. It's not. Nixon talked about this in the 1960s about the silent majority or whatever. He narrowly won the popular vote, which for a Republican always means that you win the electoral college. But he won the electoral college like 300 to 190 or some shit like that. It wasn't close.
Right.
And he was correct. He said, look, the news media can constantly inundate you every day with this and this and this and this and this, and none of it's really accurate. You people don't believe that, and you can prove it by coming out to vote, and they did, right? So what's that challenge in 2021 to people sitting at home in the digital world, like come out to vote? It's not an actual vote anymore, right? You're voting with the way you act on a day-to-day basis. So I wonder a lot about, and that's why we like having people like you on the show and Bogosian and Tyson and even McConaughey, people that are critical thinkers. What is the message that you craft? Because it's not going to be silent majority again. There's too much political baggage attached to that. What is the message you craft to challenge people to start doing this? Like you have power. You have power in individually and also as groups of people. Because people don't feel like they have power right now. Conservative people feel like the entire university and media systems are against them. And maybe it is, maybe it isn't. It doesn't matter because they believe it is, right?
Yeah.
And liberals believe that fucking Trump is crazy and he's trying to fucking, become a tyrant or whatever the fuck, which is ridiculous. But I mean, people believe this shit, so it doesn't matter if it's true or not. So how do you get people who just want to be, and this is like 12% on each side. The vast majority of people are just like, shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
I want Pop-Tarts, I want my iPad,
Hot Pockets, dude.
Hot Pockets, my iPad, and for you to shut the fuck up. I want those 4 things. So
the American dream.
Yeah, it is.
I want extra croutons.
My iPad and for you to shut the fuck up.
Yeah, dude, and extra croutons on my Olive Garden salad.
So I do wonder a lot what that message is. How do you communicate that to people in a way that inspires and motivates them to take control of how they feel about things that are happening. You know what I mean? Because people react now. It's I'm sure you've read The Coddling of the American Mind. They detail this really well about how we've been trained to exhibit and embrace the tenets of post-traumatic stress. Doesn't make any sense, right? Like emotional reasoning and catastrophizing and all this stupid shit. We've been taught that. So how do you unteach that? I mean, I guess it's cognitive behavioral therapy. That's how you treat post-traumatic stress disorder, right? But what does cognitive behavioral therapy look like on the national or even international digital level?
Yeah, I don't know about that, actually. I'm still undecided about the thesis of coddling of the American mind. It's unclear to me to what extent there is actual, felt trauma and post-traumatic stress experiencing that people are actually experiencing versus the alternate hypothesis that I'm putting forth is all that's changed really is the rhetoric that people use to kind of advance their political positions. And that in the past, maybe the rhetoric was about, that language is offensive or that language is, I don't know, morally wrong. But now the way you make those points is to talk about that language being harmful, like psychologically harmful. But it's not necessarily that people are experiencing psychological harm in most cases. It's just we've sort of moved as a society towards like causing psychological harm to people is so terrible that that's the trump card that like if you play that, then someone has to stop what they're doing.
Exactly. Well, that last part you said is critical, right? So we assigned a social value, a social reward to being offended now. So there's an impetus to be offended whether you are or not. Obviously, a lot of people are going to have confirmation. Like people want to be part of the in group. We buy clothes for that reason. We listen to music for that reason. We do pretty much everything we do in life is the keeping up with the Joneses thing. When we start keeping up with the Joneses becomes feeling offended and becoming more divisive because of it, we've got a real fucking problem, right? I mean, that is a huge problem. And I agree with you. There's a lot of holes in that book, but the attack on intersectionality specifically makes a lot of sense to me, how we rank everybody by their individual characteristics and to say, all right, you should be, I mean, let's see, you get a total score. Like you should be 64% offended because of all your stuff. Like, oh yeah. Is that really how we're going? That's not really the pioneer attitude of America, is it? Where women who have been fucked over for 200 years just got the right to vote 20 years prior, right? We're like, hey, we need you to come build fucking ships and fucking planes and shit. Like, all right, cool, we'll do that. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like when 30,000 some Japanese men volunteered to go fight in the war from internment camps. And I'm not saying that should be, internment camps and women not voting should not be the standard, but the standard should be, I'm going to put more into this goddamn country than I take out of it, right? That should be the standard. And it's not. It's what can you do for me? I mean, JFK obviously had something to say about that.
And then he got his head blown off.
Yeah.
So,
well, we always kill people that say things we're uncomfortable with. Right?
Yeah.
Like Jesus told a bunch of fucking judgy ass first century Jews, the Pharisees and Sadducees, to respect your neighbor, right? To do more for them than they do for you, that you shouldn't be monetizing this people's faith and stuff like that. And they fucking killed him for it.
Yeah.
Martin Luther King said a lot of stuff, killed him for it. Medgar Evers killed him for it, right? Gandhi killed him for it. That's what we do.
Tupac killed him for it. Killed him for him. And on that, we'll get to the Drinkin' Bro of the week, which is someone who has inspired you or helps you become the person you are today. Julia, who would you like to give the Drinkin' Bro of the week to?
Oh, man. Does it have to be a living person?
No, they can be dead as shit.
I guess I want to give it to A.J. Ayer. He's a philosopher from the mid-1900s, and he wrote a book called Language, Truth, and Logic, which I read when I was 18, and it was one of those like, the kind of thing that can happen when you read a book when you're 18, and he just kind of skewered all of mainstream philosophy, and also he was like 23 or something, young 20s when he wrote it. And so it's this fiery manifesto in favor of clear thinking and truth and, thinking logically. And so that was a very influential book for me. And I feel like he would actually appreciate a Drinkin' Bros award.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. Awesome. Well, look, the book is out now. Tell everybody where they can find you and the book. I mean, besides Amazon and everything.
Yeah. No, the book's called The Scout Mindset. It should be available at most places where you buy books. You can find it on the Penguin Random House site, or just go to scoutmindset.com. I'm Julia Galef on Twitter, and my website is juliagalef.com. You can read there about my own podcast, Rationally Speaking, and some of my videos on YouTube and other stuff that I'm up to.
Awesome. Well, hey, thank you for being here today. We greatly appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. It was fun.
Yeah, we appreciate the conversation, because, look, we should have more of it. Otherwise, nothing will ever change. Dan's going to give it the good fight. I've given up on anything's going to change, but I enjoy having the conversation at least. So,
Likewise.
Thanks again. For D'Anthony Hollaway, I'm Ross Patterson. This is the Drinkin' Bros podcast. Good night, everyone.